You know, for all the hate and backlash we as the player base like to give towards a bunch of champions in League, there's a fine line you draw between fuck this champ and delete this. League has a multitude of big time offenders in the metagame, some who you might say the world would be better off without, but outright dismissing a champion from the roster is an extreme decision that has never happened before, and frankly never should. The only time a champion was quote-unquote removed from the game was Gangplank back in 2015 during the whole Misfortune vs Gangplank saga, but then he came back shortly after anyway, so we could rule that out as a canonical Easter egg. In the now 15 years the game has been out for, never once has Riot considered outright backing a champion out of the roster. But as a thought experiment, what if hypothetically we were allowed to think about who to get rid of? Personally, I'm against the thought of a champion ever being removed for two reasons. It could be a very slippery slope, and there's also nothing the players and the company stand to gain by doing it. That being said, doubtless we all have a personal vendetta against a champion or two that we would love to see removed from the game, myself included. So for today, I want to go over some champions who I think should have been left on the cutting room floor. They're here now and we have to deal with them, but if say we could travel back to the past and have a talk with the designer of those champs, these would be the ones I want to target. Before we talk about the video though, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor for today, Punk. They're having an early access promotion at the moment, so if you're interested in getting in on this early, now's a good time to do so. Punk's an isometric open world MMO that combines aspects of MMOs, MOBAs, and action RPGs with a very punk aesthetic to it, if it wasn't obvious by the name. The game's built around an open world with character progression emulating MMOs, while at the same time having a MOBA-style experience to it that you can tap into for both PvE and PvP game modes. In essence, the overall gameplay is open world MMORPG, so you got your usual skill trees, leveling system, equipment crafting, and whatnot, while the combat is based on a MOBA template, complemented by the expected fog of war and strategy aspects you tend to find in one. Also, for you lore enjoyers out there, Punk's story is delivered in a seasonal format with each episode featuring a standalone plot, so there's an overarching narrative to look forward to. Now, I know we all like to meme on League for being a spaghetti code mess. The developers of Punk, however, expressed a strong interest in rigorous balancing, quality of life improvements, and developments based on player feedback, with an aim to make a more community-centric game. So once again, if you're looking for something fresh to try out, check out their early access by using the link on screen or in the description below. One more time, the game is still early access, but they are working to perfect it as much as they can. Thanks again to Punk for sponsoring the video, but for now, let's get back on topic. See, my thought process for whether or not a champion's a mistake is if they completely override the rules or preconceived notions of the game. There's nothing wrong with venturing into a new idea or pushing the limits of what's acceptable, but it's another matter to outright disregard limitations and make someone who goes against everything the players know about the game. It's like using kicks in boxing, it becomes a completely different game at that point. For all the I give to Mr. Edgy Kirito, I will acknowledge that he technically still falls within the scope of other champions of his category, even if he's skirting a ridiculously fine line. You'll see that as a recurring theme across a handful of champs I talk about in this video. The notion of them flagrantly going against the rules and expectations of their presumed archetypes in a way that leads to more negative than positive experiences. I don't think this should come to anyone's surprise, but the biggest offender would be Yuumi. Following her gameplay adjustment in early 2023, I think most people have moved on from their grudge against her and the negative experiences we've had towards her. But that doesn't necessarily mean she's off the hook. Yes, she's not public enemy number 1 at the moment, but people generally take issue with her design as a whole, given she's the most hated champion of all time, surpassing even Shaco, which is high praise, or should I say infamy. It beggars belief that no one objected to her very concept as a champion across all concerned parties who were involved in her conception. The idea of a support champion, one who can attach to a partner and grant them a myriad of benefits and stats while simultaneously being immune to any attempts by the enemy team to prevent them from doing so, should have automatically come off as a red flag from the get-go. Forget any other factor or balancing metric. This alone should have been more than sufficient of a reason to back up and reevaluate if it's worth making her or not. The whole purpose of a support, namely Enchanter, is to accompany their carry and by extension their team in a fight and offer assistance any way they can. Part of the skill required to master support is to weigh the benefits and risks of exposing themselves to enemy threats, seeing as they're close to the action despite lacking the tools needed to defend themselves. Furthermore, they also have to understand their ancillary roles, leaving their main partner, typically the AD carry, to roam and place down wards or maybe assist another ally temporarily, weighing the pros and cons behind doing that or knowing when they can safely do so at minimal opportunity cost. Yuumi by design breaks both aspects to the support experience in ways that are detrimental not just to other players' experiences but also to the experience of the person playing her. For starters, she's unable to provide buffs or utility to her teammate unless attached to them. In doing so, Yuumi renders herself untargetable, overriding the first aspect of skill, which is being exposed to danger while attempting to heal, shield, whatever your ally. An element of counterplay that gives the enemy team agency in this scenario is that it becomes a guessing game. If the support burns their skills on their carry, you can instead turn your attention to the support and get rid of them quickly. Vice versa, if the support's under attack, their carry is completely exposed. Yumi eliminates the need to choose by hiding behind whoever she's supporting, making it so you always want to use a boss on your carry since there's no chance the enemy can punish you for doing so. For that matter, it removes the need for the person Yumi's supporting to stay close to her as she innately follows them, so you have no need to care about positioning relative to your team. Presumably, the balancing metric is that if Yumi's partner dies and there's no one close by for her to escape to, she's effectively dead as well. You essentially double down on the success or failure of one champion. On paper that's true, but anyone who spent more than 5 minutes playing Pokemon knows that trying to take down 2 level 50 Pokemon's a lot easier than taking down 1 level 80 Pokemon. When she came out, Yumi had the capacity to make anyone so unbelievably powerful it took a superhuman effort just to take them down. There was next to no alternative for the enemy team to shut them down besides a head-on confrontation, which as we just went over is a losing battle more often than not. Riot's argument in defense of Yumi is that they wanted to give someone who is more beginner-friendly to support players and maybe serve as a gateway to the support role. But ironically, Yumi's a lot more difficult to play than a typical support because she requires an entirely different playstyle to be efficient. You can't play her like a Soraka or Janna or whoever. Conversely, trying to play Janna or Soraka like a Yumi will also get you needlessly killed. So if a person attempts to learn the support role through Yumi, they can't transfer the fundamentals and macro knowledge to other supports since Yumi is so different from her peers. Her low mechanical skill floor makes it easy for players to get the wrong idea when playing as her, believing all they have to do is tag on to someone in AFK, pressing a button or two here and there. The issue is, Yumi is still a support. She still has to do support things like check for vision, change targets on whoever she's protecting based on who needs it the most, and so on. Like I mentioned, the point of a support is to divide your resources and abilities across your entire party, not just your main carry. Yumi can only support one person at a time and tricks players into doing so, typically sticking to whoever has the highest chance of carrying and not really doing anything else. In fact, even though they made her much less efficient if you AFK on her, they also explicitly discouraged you from trying to support a bunch of people, rather incentivizing you to stick to one person for the entirety of the game. So in totality, Yumi's not only unfun to play against, but she's also unfun to play with for everyone who isn't her best friend, and more importantly, she doesn't at all teach you how to actually play support. It would be no exaggeration to say that you're playing a counterintuitively different game on her than you would on anyone else, in a way that ends up being a negative experience for both parties. It doesn't matter how they try to balance or fix her, she will never be in a healthy spot considering her fundamental gameplay just should not be allowed to exist in League. A more recent example, and I know I've been mentioning him a lot lately, is gonna be Kante. Having recently just talked about him in my Hated Champions video, I'll echo a lot of the same sentiments here, but of course go more in depth on them. Just like how you can't approach Yumi the same way you approach any other support, you can't approach Kante the same way you approach any other tank. Moreover, you can't approach Kante the same way you approach any other skirmisher either. Ordinarily, when it comes to hybrid champions, even if they're capable of doubling as two classes, you can still more or less take them on the same way you approach them regardless of which class they are. The only time you can't is if the two classes they are a hybrid of have strengths that cancel out each other's weaknesses. The real reason Kante is such a demon to fight and the balanced nightmare to end all balanced nightmares is because there's no easy way to deal with him if the player knows how to conceal his weaknesses. Other hybrid champions, no matter how well you play them, have flaws that cannot be overcome whatsoever. That's what keeps them fair. Akshan's a marksman-assassin hybrid, but both marksmen and assassins can be shut down by the same thing. Looking at Kante, let's go through every single possible weakness of a warden, and then every single possible weakness of a skirmisher just to bring to focus what I mean by going against the rules of the game. One weakness of a warden is that compared to their sister class of vanguards, wardens don't have the best engage potential. They may have a gap closer or some way to initiate crowd control, but they usually function at their best when under attack, not when they attack. As a warden, Kante would appear to follow the same rules. His dash isn't that fast, and even at faster cast times, you can react to his Q and W on demand. But when he switches to skirmisher mode, the guy has so much stick potential it feels like you can never get away from him. He will rush you down to Kingdom Come once he's on top of you. Another weakness of a warden is their second-rate damage. Unless your name is Poppy. Holy sh*, Poppy's the fakest warden to ever exist. As a warden, yes, Kante takes a while to kill you, but as a skirmisher, he shreds through anyone. What about on the skirmisher end of things? While not nearly as squishy as a marksman or a mage, skirmishers can't handle that much punishment. Start getting some chip damage in on them, and if they don't have a way to lifesteal it back, they're in trouble. The same strategy doesn't work against Kante that well. He can sit pretty in defense mode as long as he wants to, yet you have to constantly respect the fact that he can switch to attack mode at a moment's notice. Pathmaker's damage mitigation and the shield from footwork only make it harder for you to chip him down. The second weakness of a skirmisher is that most of them forfeit hard CC in favor of damage, so you can usually skirt around them. Kante on the other hand has a boatload of CC, being mostly a warden. Pathmaker changes to an offensive ability during All Out, but he still has the Yasuo and Yone style AoE knockups. Much like how Yumi forced her opponents to face her head-on by playing by a different set of rules, Kante has something similar wherein there's honestly no way you can deal with him besides just taking him head-on, even though he plays with a stacked deck. Marksmen and fighters can't shut the ward inside of him down easily because he's also a skirmisher. Mages can't poke him down easily because he's also a warden. Assassins get shut down by both tanks and skirmishers, and you also can't play the wet noodle fight by bringing a tank of your own because Kante's part skirmisher who can shred through tanks without breaking a sweat. The constant reworking of his toolkit eventually arrived at a healthier rendition of his gameplay, but the premise is still there. Kante's abilities are designed in such a way that really the only way to beat him is to never interact with him directly. There is one shared weakness of a skirmisher and warden, their short effective range. Outside of laning phase though, where there's more ways to work around a poor neutral game, you just have to hope the Kante player is bad, or you have someone on your team who carries an even bigger stick than him. For the longest time ever, that was hard to come by. You're already skirting a fine line with hybrid champions, but you can make it work if you're careful about it. And for what it's worth, at least he does what you expect a top laner to do. The same can't be said for this next guy. Pyke. Oh, Pyke. Pyke's story is in some ways identical to Kante and Yumi, but it comes from a different angle. By this point you should have noticed the trend. Yumi, Pyke, and Kante. The same thing happened to all three of them. They start out as a massive problem. Riot tries to find ways to make them less efficient, such as nerfing their stats and numbers, or making them more inconsistent to play, what have you. After constant changes and adjustments, they eventually say to hell with it and gut the champion, leaving them a shell of their former self. I wouldn't go so far as to say they're not viable. Pyke has actually been doing decently well as of late. I'm more referring to how far they had to go to keep him in line. Pyke doesn't exactly force a degenerate game state like Yumi and Kante. The problem with him is that he's a carry champion designed to be played in support. Carry supports were a thing before Pyke, so we're not exactly navigating unfamiliar territory here. But unlike Zyra, Vel'Koz, Lux, and so on who were carries first, that just so happened to pass for a support, Pyke was intentionally created to be one. Not as another range support, but as a catcher support, more specifically an assassin. Assassins are the farthest thing from a support you can think of. They're the ultimate solo class, the most gold and kill-hungry class in the game. So what did they do to alleviate that without turning him into a KSer? By doing just that, turning him into a KSer. Death from below was a money printing machine for a long time, allowing Pyke to score a kill or sometimes 2 kills worth of gold, while at the same time giving gold to his party. But they had to account for the fact that he would take a lot of harass damage in bot lane as a melee champion, so they gave him his passive. His ability to amass gold without having to CS and regenerate health by backing off caused a number of people to play him in mid lane, where ironically Pyke was even better than down in bot lane. He could do support and carry things at the same time, hooking and stunning people to set up for his team and scoring kills with his ultimate. It's honestly fascinating just the sheer lengths the balance team went to respond to this. They had to make Bone Skewer fully single target so he couldn't push waves. They also had to make Phantom Undertow damage only champions as well. They then had to nerf his passive to be functionally worthless in a 1v1 setting, and then they also had to nerf his ultimate to where the value of it's a lot worse if you get a solo kill. They gutted 4 out of 5 of his abilities to get him out of solo lane, and people still play him in mid lane from time to time. That's the issue with Pyke. Even though he doesn't have the 1v9 potential of Kante or the privilege of AFKing like Yumi, supports either have to choose between supporting or killing, never both. That's why people don't like carry supports, because they often have very little, if any, utility. Pyke on the other hand can do the same supporty stuff that other engaged supports do, but simultaneously he poses a lethal threat in his own right. It's why he's consistently one of the most played supports in the game. Pyke's a support who can actually kill people. All support champions should have the right to defend themselves, but historically more people have been scared of Pyke than the actual AD carry, because oftentimes Pyke is the bigger threat among the two. Evidenced by him completely ditching his ADC and wreaking havoc in mid lane to the point where Riot had to gut his entire kit to force him into just support. If you have to fundamentally change a character to such an extent as Pyke, Kante, and Yumi, then it's not balance that's the issue, it's the concept. Those 3 champions have been mutilated by the balance and design teams, and people still talk about how obnoxious they are to play against. Besides Yone, if I had to choose 3 champions to retroactively never introduce to the game, I would pick them. Not because I personally hate them, rather I just think there were some examples of Riot games crossing the line. The line's been crossed, so there's nothing we can do about it, but let me know if humanity ever invents a time machine. What about you guys? If you could pick 3 champions who you believe never should have been brought to League in the first place, who would they be? If I could pick 2 more, I would probably then choose Yone and Tahm Kench, but after Tahm Kench got reworked, I think he's alright. So maybe Shaco? Anyway, let me know in the comments down below. That's it for today, so if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other discussion videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.